Hi everyone, welcome to our 43rd video session. Today we'll be learning about the principles and trends of circular economy from Simona Grande. But before we begin with that, let me introduce what we do at Impaction and our video sessions in the first place, and then we'll go around and introduce ourselves to the community as well. So Impaction is ultimately making it more accessible for people to create a positive change in their local communities. We have an international community, so we have people, based from around the world. And the purpose of our video sessions is to connect with people face to face and learn a little bit more about what they're doing, especially people in social impact, an often overlooked sector in the social impact space. So let me just introduce myself and then we'll go into introductions for the rest of the community members. I'm Shivani. I'm one of the co-founders of Impaction, and I'm based here in Chicago, Illinois. Shorjo, do you want to go next?
So I'm Shorjo. I'm based in Gujarat, India, and I'm in the transportation and logistics industry.
Thank you. Bethany, do you want to go?
Sure. I'm Bethany. I'm based in DC. I'm currently working as a budget analyst for the government, but I'm also interested in economic development and kind of international development intersections.
Awesome. Thank you. Abdul Latif?
Yeah, I'm Abdul Latif. I'm from Nigeria here.
Thank you. And Maribel is also on the call. She's listening in, but she's a social entrepreneur based out in the East Coast, and she has an enterprise called Love for Immigrants. So check them out. And Simona, I'll just go in and introduce you, and then you can go right into your presentation. Today, we will be learning about the principles and trends of circular economy from Simona Grande. She's a researcher with a background in management and food innovation. In her professional experience, she worked in China as a consultant, in India for Ashoka, in South Africa and Mexico as a part of the Global Entrepreneurship Summer School. In the past 5 years, she collaborated with different food organizations, interviewed 500 plus food experts globally, and coordinated teams of researchers on various research areas. She believes in the power of experiential learning as a driver for innovation and change. We're so excited to have you here, Simona, and I'll let you take it away.
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Shivani, and thanks to the whole Impaction team for having me in this session. So I'm going to share my screen. So as Shivani mentioned, today we're going to talk about circular economy, the principles, the trends, and some impact stories from my experience. So the first time Shivani and I had a call, we of course talked about my journey, my professional experience, and immediately we started talking about circular economy as a possible topic for our session. Also because I soon realized how already the Impaction logo somehow embeds some circular principles already. So it felt very nice and very obvious. When I started also thinking about my personal experience, my journey, and what I could share with you, I started brainstorming and mapping a little bit why I became so interested in this concept and why it could be interesting for you as well, and maybe could be inspiring. So I've reflected, and for me, circular economy is definitely all about change, is about rethinking the whole system. It's about something very complex. It's a challenge that has to be faced and that has to be overcome. It's all about regeneration, has empathy as its core principle, and definitely it's all about making a positive impact. So when started off talking about the circular economy, what usually happens is that we start defining and analyzing what a linear economy is. A linear economy is an economy that has its principles in take, make, dispose, plan. So this means that the raw materials are collected and transformed into products that are used until they are discarded as waste. So the value is created by producing and selling as much as possible of these products. This system dates back to the first industrial revolution, and it has been the prevailing model in the market ever since, and still it is now. So why it is reaching its limits and why are we starting to rethink this system. So definitely because of what we are facing currently, the so-called grand challenges. So climate change, the increased inequalities, a growing population. And so what all the countries in the world, for the first time in history, more united, have tried to tackle and plan and to face in a more integrated approach with, for example, the adoption of the Sustainable Development Goals of the Agenda 2030. So what is a circular economy then? We have here graphical representation from the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, that is the leading organization working in this field. So circular economy means shifting to a system where we regenerate natural systems, we design out waste and pollution, and we keep products and materials in use. So there has been great innovations in this field and a great shift already. However, the world is now only 8.6% circular at the moment. And we have this statistics from Circular Economy, that is another important organization in the field, and this has been released in their latest report. So, as mentioned in the introduction, today I would like to tell you some stories of impact through a circular economy that hopefully can inspire you, and that both you and the overall Impaction community, so we can positively contribute to this transition to the circular economy and make our own impact in it. So these will be stories of innovative ideas and the entrepreneurs behind them that I have encountered in these years of research in the field. My research has been mostly on food, on the food industry. So all the ideas we will be talking about and all these entrepreneurs somehow work in the food industry. We again have a graphical representation of what a circular economy of food means from the Ellen MacArthur Foundation. So it means sourcing food that is grown regeneratively and locally where appropriate. It means design and market healthier food products, and it means making the most of our food by reintroducing byproducts into the economy. So let's start with the first story. This is Berta. She's the founder of Rice Products based in New York City. This company started off as a university project from NYU University. And what they do is that they collect waste from local breweries in New York City. So the so-called spent grains, which are the main byproduct of these breweries. And then they turn it into high protein and sustainable flour that they sell to pastry chefs and restaurants across New York City. And they have now expanded to other cities as well. Then we have another project coming from NYU, and this is me with Parker from Grounded Upcycling. So they collect waste from the coffee production to make different products, such as, for example, what you see there, a soap for body use. Then we have here Garvita, that I personally worked with during my experience with Ashoka in India. She runs the project called Why Waste that has the aim to have people shifting their mindset into a more circular one and more respectful of the planet by not wasting food and water. We have here Bekita and Viata. They are the founders of Aqua Farms Africa. They have been pioneers in this respect because they've been the first ones in the state of Guinea to start producing fresh vegetables thanks to the aquaponics technique, which doesn't use soil and uses 90% less water than conventional agriculture. Then we have Fabricio. He's from Brazil and he runs Feitosa Food Tech that just won the Thought for Food Circular Economy of Food Prize. What the company does is that it collects bananas that are ripe or that would be otherwise wasted, and also its peels, and convert them into gourmet products such as ketchup and jams. And then we have this incredible team from US, but that started off in Chile. So by visiting a fishing village in Chile, guys found out how many fishing nets were discarded and thrown away in the oceans. And that was causing, of course, pollution and the death of fish in the ocean. And so they thought of using these fishing nets for some interesting production, and they started off with skateboards, and they now are also working on other products. Then we have this other amazing team that I had the chance to meet when I was in USA. They're based in California, but they're now working in several states in US. So what they do is that they collect produce, so fruits and vegetables that are somehow imperfect and wouldn't make it to the market, especially in grocery stores, because they're maybe imperfect. They're so-called ugly fruits and veggies because of their shape. So they have some cosmetics defect, let's say. And also sometimes it happens that farms have a surplus of production and don't know where to sell these produce. So what they do is that they collect all these produce and then they deliver it to everywhere in the US where they are based. Of course, also with this local approach. So all the produce that is collected in that specific area gets redistributed in that area as well through very nice boxes. And they also work in food education in schools to make this transition easier for kids to understand. Then we have Rob. He's the founder of Toastale. They're based in UK. They collect bread, leftover bread from bakeries, and turn them into different kinds of beers that they produce. And then we have this now phenomenon that is now in Europe, which is Too Good To Go, that started in Denmark. They basically connect restaurant owners to final consumers. And what you find by downloading this app is that you get to see different products that would be discounted because they would be otherwise thrown away at the end of the day. And then they package them into so-called magic box. So you make this order and then you go to this shop owner or you get it delivered. There's always some kind of surprise because you don't actually know which kind of product you will get. As you can see, the space of action in the circular economy is very broad. There are already so many innovative ideas and so many pioneers that are really change makers in this field, and everybody can play its role. So when it comes to the circular economy of food, we always talk about a multi-sectoral and multidisciplinary and systemic approach, because really everyone in the system can play its role by contributing with its own actions. So from the food producers to the food brands to learning institutions, financial institutions, governments, waste management companies, restaurants, retailers, final consumers. So I would like to know what are your ideas about the circular economy and the circular economy of food. If you already heard about the concept, how would you define it? Because there's not a like one unique definition. We can also build our own during this session. And also, I would like to know how you are contributing to the circular economy through your own actions. So thank you very much, and I'm looking forward to the discussion now.
Thank you, Simona. And I'm going to kick this off with the definition. So I think Maribel has posted on our idea forum about, the definition for the circular economy. So I'll go ahead and start sharing my screen so we can start this off. So Simona, yes, she started with, posing the question about how do you define a circular economy? What's your favorite example? And Maribel went ahead and said when she thinks about a circular economy, she thinks of terms like upcycle and cradle to cradle, coined by William McDonough. The idea being that if products are created intentionally, all parts of it can be reused and don't have to end up in landfills. So that's her initial definition, but I'll open it up to the rest of the community.
So I had one question about that statistic. You've got 8.6. That overall. I'll take rather looking at food. What I'll do is in our sector, I'll take a look at understanding what it is. So a lot of the waste when it comes to materials like rags, plastics, they end up here as a whole in terms of being used again to make new products in India. Would that count as a circular economy definition as being reused again here in another country, whether it's wasted rag, wasted plastic?
Yeah, sure. It would be when we're talking about something that maybe I have observed when working in India. That is
Mm-hmm.
also like a combination between circular economy and frugal innovation, right? Because what
Right.
happens sometimes is that people reuse these products and make some others to resell. Of course, when it comes to these global statistics, they account for what also big corporations are doing, and sometimes they do not track everything that is actually happening. So, for instance, it would fall into this definition definitely. I am not sure that it's counted in these kind of statistics, as it is a little bit difficult to have a measurement, right, of what happens in this. But definitely what I have seen when working in India at Ashoka was that, of course, circular economy, let's say, seems to be this new term and this new phenomena, whereas it is really embedded in some cultures, and it was definitely something that all our grandparents were already doing, right? And especially in countries like India, is something that is was at least very embedded in the culture, because it comes also goes down to like making the most of what you have. And even in Italy was exactly like that for my grandparents, when the resources were scarce or perceived to be scarcer. Definitely was something that people were just naturally doing. With the industrial revolution and the globalization and this perceivedness of having perception of having so much, at least some parts of the world forgot, right, about these very natural principles, and they're going back now, also taking examples from cultures that had this very embedded. So India is one of the examples that comes back pretty often when it comes to circular economy, even in the way the Indian cooking, the Indian cuisine is there is a lot of that into like using different parts of a product and not wasting. So definitely it is a very interesting example, and personally was very inspiring for me in my experience, in my journey.
Thank you, Simona. Does anyone have any thoughts or follow-ups to that?
One thing I was just thinking, I don't remember the term you used, but the idea of making the business pitch for this is this idea, like in the West, I think the best way to pitch this sort of circular economy or upcycling mentality is that like it costs less in the long term to like reuse things. And I think that that's something that exists a lot of places. Like when I lived in West Africa, like there's nothing that gets wasted because it's just not, it's not an option. But yet there's still a lot of trash because so many products are shifting to like this single use, like wasteful mentality. And I think that we're seeing that start to shift, but until it's more affordable for people to have access to products that have a more of a reusable aspect to them, we're going to continue to see like the issue with waste. With food, it's a little bit different because I feel like, I mean, food waste is a huge issue, but the ways you can reuse food are a little more obvious sometimes, and other things maybe aren't as obvious. So I would be curious to see how much, when you're working with different people in different areas, how much of this pitch is like a moral imperative or an environmental imperative, and how much of it is like think about the business decision behind like being less wasteful. Like, would you say it's kind of like an even split, or it depends on where you are?
Yeah, definitely. I agree with everything that you said about the Western mentality and approach. So right now, it is somehow all of that. So when it comes to these corporations and businesses, there is an aspect to it which is doing good also costs less somehow, which is always appealing because at the end of the day, they have to deal with numbers and with money and pay salaries. So that is of course the in the conversation, that is of course very important, because if it would actually also cost more, or like being very difficult to be done, that would be even another barrier for them. So it's definitely that. And then it is more and more also about inside the so-called planetary boundaries because of different reasons. So one is, of course, that these sustainable development goals are more and more embedded in the international and national policies. And right now, having to deal with waste in terms of discarding it, it's starting to become expensive for these companies. So these policies try really to encourage the circular economy approach by taxing, the waste and so on. And at the same time, financial institutions are now starting special programs that give incentives in terms of interest rates and so on to companies that do good. So they are also incentivized with these investment strategies. For example, there are different financial institutions and banks that do invest in these kind of restructuring and transformations of companies that do want to become more circular. So that is also playing, again, an important role because it's, again, connected to money. And then the other aspect is the consumers, right? So millennials and the Gen Z, the whole movement of Fridays for Future, these are things that are starting to become very present and very loud, right? So companies have to find ways to approach these generations and to be appreciated by them by doing something good. And circular economy is something that is easy, to understand because, even big corporations are now, recycling tires or plastic bottles from the ocean to make clothes, for example, or they really take into consideration the resources that go into the production of the food that they're selling. And this is becoming more and more relevant. So it's somehow all of that from my observations and experience.
That's interesting that you talk a little bit about the corporations that are more, I don't know if it's under pressure, or it's more of like a PR thing for them to, attract consumers and with their purchasing power and these more for good initiatives. You also brought up Gurvita from Why Waste. So she was a presenter for us a while back, and actually during that session, there was a community member that had a really good question where she was talking about, I think it was Nike or Adidas or whoever it was. They had made these shoes that were made from recycled materials in their factories. And her question was, I mean, maybe on the PR side, this seems like it's initially good, but the energy it takes to recreate these shoes, does it offset the recycled materials that they're reusing? So are you contributing more to the environmental, conditions in that way? And I don't know if anyone has thoughts about that.
Yeah, so what I can say is definitely that's an issue. When this whole movement, of the circular economy started, even big corporations wanted to play a role. They actually didn't know. They didn't make this calculation, or at least some of them didn't. What is becoming more and more relevant right now and will become in this field is the measurement of the actual efficiency of this model. Probably some of the products that have been presented on the market as circular weren't exactly, that efficient. However, they somehow contributed to the conversation. So like more and more companies started to reflect on these principles and started to think, okay, what can we also do? And then it sparked the interest of small social entrepreneurs like these guys who went to Chile and saw that they could make an impact by reusing these fishing nets. And then there are others, like there's another one called ecoals that started collecting plastic bottles to make backpacks, flip-flops. So yes, for sure there are products that are labeled as circular on the market now that maybe are still not so efficient, but we are getting there. People will demand more and more some precise information, and these companies will have to put that in the label: how much energy was used, how much of that was actually recyclable, and how much was like reintroduced in the supply chain. Yes, it is still a question mark, but it's something that everyone, in this field, like institutions and financial institutions as well, and governments, they're looking into that, into measurement and tools to make this very clear and to make people understand how circular it is, because not everything that is circular at the same amount.
So I had one question. For recycling, we were doing an interesting project in recycling. So in 2018, China had banned plastic imports. So we were trying to do a project in which if we could divert all this plastic imports to our country, to India, because we thought it'd be a good business opportunity to get more cargo handled in our ports, and it'd be useful to actually reuse that in our special economic zone to produce more products to export back out. But what we found out when we were trying to do that was that even the Indian government at that time was starting to ban all these wasted plastic imports. So what we were really finding out there was supposed to be a recycling upheaval happening in the United States during that time. I wanted to ask you, what has recycling really reduced in the United States in the last few years? Because if with the Chinese bans out plastic, even in the Indian bans and the Indonesian bans increasing, how is recycling actually doing in the United States in terms of usage? Is that the best option, or is there a better alternative for circular economy? So what have you noticed from a recycling point of view? Are the rates actually going down? Would you say in the U.S.? Because if you can't export out the products to the other countries, recycling is not really economical as a trend of what we've seen for non-food.
Yes, I'm actually not so familiar about the current statistics on recycling. In general, like what the circular economy approach and movement started off is a mindset shift into recycling is just a part of it.
True.
And that is important, as we mentioned before, and also Maribel very well said in the comment to the idea in the forum, that products have to be designed in a way that then are recyclable, or they last longer, or somehow, depending on which product it is, because it really depends, but to be as much regenerative as possible, so to have as many lives as possible. I would like to hear from Abdullah your experience, and what are you hearing in your community about these concepts? And sorry if I mispronounced your name. I'm sorry.
No problem about that. So, actually, in Nigeria here, many youths are going into recycling. SDG activists are working towards recycling. The government are trying to see how they can support that, and many opportunities also are also supporting that. So many youths are going into recycling. Like me myself, we recycle cassava and Arabian waste into paints. So there are other people that recycle normal waste, all this plastic waste, and so you realize that we have a lot of waste, which is causing erosion and so on and so forth. So the government itself is encouraging youth that are working on that aspect of recycling. So well, many of us right now are into recycling, and it has been quite commendable here. So we are far below where the recycling is supposed to be, but notwithstanding, people are still doing very fine on recycling here in Nigeria.
That's excellent. I really like your project on using. Can you tell me again, what do you use for the paints? Cassava and
Cassava gum Arabic. So we use it in
Arabic gum.
we use it in producing paint, because we realize that paint raw materials are largely imported into Nigeria, like about 80%. And it is quite not cheap to get paint. It is quite not affordable to get paint here in Nigeria, especially for low and middle income Nigeria. So we just have to look for a way to supplement that. So there are a lot of recycling that is going on here. Quite so, this is really helpful for me, because I'm able to see other things too. That is very impressive.
Thank you very much. And also your project is very impressive. And I have seen similar projects, for example, in Hong Kong, where there's this company called Dialicious. And what they do is that they collect fruits and veggies, especially the peels, but also entire fruits and veggies from school canteens. They turn it into powders that then are used to produce paints or colors. They're also safer for kids to use because they're not so toxic, as some other more chemical ones.
I studied chemistry in university, and pigment has been very, very harmful to people. And I've always looked for a way to see how the paint pigment also can be produced firstly locally, because the pigments are also in China, like other raw materials. And pigments are also harmful, very toxic, like you said. They contain some heavy metals that are harmful to even aquatic animals and the likes. If I would like, I don't know, I would like to learn more about what they do. I would like to, if possible, know them. So I don't know how you can be of help.
Definitely. I can share with you their name and their contacts so you can maybe interview them and so on. So I'll make sure to do that through Shivani, or maybe I can already write the name here in the chat.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll send up a follow-up email so everyone has each other's email addresses in case you want to take this connection further.
Yes, I'm also writing in the chat.
It's important to know, how recycling is sort of overlapped with this idea with circular economy. It's not exactly the same thing, but it's also, about for-profit organizations and nonprofits to be working in this way. So, Simona, I guess a question that I have for you is, it seems like this is more of a for-profit type of business model. Would that be a correct assumption that I'm making?
I would say it can be both. So, for example, there are a lot of now benefit companies that are becoming circular. For instance, Goodtogo is one of them. I have seen different kinds of business models being circular. So, from profit to non-profit, some of these initiatives actually started maybe non-profit, but then they realized that there is also an option to make money by doing good, and then it could be like a social enterprise that then reinvest all of these profits into regenerating value and into the community. So it also depends on how these profits are used. So it is the good news is that it is profitable as well, and that there are more and more companies that they're understanding their role in society and reinvesting these profits into other projects that are also circular, or in the overall community, or interesting projects in supporting other entrepreneurs to start their own ideas. In general, the circular economy is really an approach, a way of seeing the world, and also the business and the economy as something that is regenerative and that somehow mimics the nature. In a way, it encourages people to view their lives, so their personal and professional lives, into this nature centered approach. And it is very systemic. So, as we have seen already before, everybody can really play a role. So nonprofit research centers can support businesses, and institutions can play a fundamental role. Educational players can be crucial for sending this message. The consumers can. Technology and digital can be enablers, for example, through social media or through systems in which we can measure and track this circularity. So it is very, very systemic and very multidisciplinary and multi-sectoral, multi-stakeholder.
And starting this in schools, or additionally, I see a gap where a lot of people who have applied and who've gone through our social innovation competition, it seems like they are facing the challenge personally, and that's why they're more inclined to work towards these circular economy towards of techniques, as if they relate to the problem where someone from their initial family or friends are facing the challenge and they have the resources to execute. So that's really interesting to disperse this level of knowledge and even action towards other institutions. I think Maribel also commented, she said, the circular economy might also start with how businesses create their materials in more compostable ways, and it also helps for people to change mindsets and not to rely so much on single-use products. Yeah, so especially I think it does start on the individual level. But she said it would help if multinational companies start preventing the problem in the initial creation of the product itself. Those are two very good points. If anyone has additional thoughts.
Definitely. And we have seen this increase in, for example, these package-free shops, as Maribel shared, all around the world. And even big companies are considering this model for their own products that are packaged goods. So they're also looking into these ideas and how they can also contribute in this way. Of course, there is still a long road to the transition, but still it is happening and we are seeing it more and more.
We only have a couple minutes left. I was thinking we could end with some action steps maybe. I think that we, like, as consumers, we have a lot of things we talk about, we've been taught to recycle for a long time, but maybe some other things we haven't heard about before that would be applicable to like the broader community.
Love it. Yeah. Simona, any thoughts?
Yeah, I would encourage you to look at your own communities and see what's out there that somehow connects to this circular economy mindset. Because as we have seen, it starts from your local community, and then another action can for sure be to spread the word and inspire other people to take similar actions. So for instance, these package free shops are more and more present in our own communities, as well as these innovative startups that are distributing, for example, ugly fruits and vegetables, or they are giving discounts on foods that would be otherwise thrown away, and help these communities, and at the same time do it ourselves at in our own way of buying. There's this quote from Slow Food that is very well known, which is, "We vote with our forks," because it really is that every time we buy a product, we choose a producer and we choose a product, we can play our role, and that could be our circular action. And at the same time, trying to embed this in our routine, being inspired even by chefs that are using all the parts of a food, of fruits and vegetables, to cook recipes. So being inspired by that in our own way of cooking, that is also interesting. And there is a lot of material online to get informed about what's happening in also other countries that maybe is applicable to our own communities. So those are somehow my insights for our personal actions. But I would love to hear from you. What are some of the actions that you are already doing, or maybe you would consider starting doing?
Yeah, that's a good question.
Yeah, Bethany, I think I'm not 100% sure, but probably imperfect produce delivers also in DC. Is that correct?
I believe they do, but I've actually heard some mixed like reviews in terms of where that food would go otherwise. So I know it's a little bit expensive, and I've heard that if people like the idea of recycling that is great, but if that food doesn't get recycled normally, I think it goes to food banks, and so it's like a little bit. I mean, I haven't done a lot of investigation into some of the background of different organizations doing that, but I think it's maybe a little bit of a fine line with some systems are already in place to recycle that food maybe in a better way. So while consumers funding that industry, I think is useful because that money can be put to good use, but there may be, there's a balance to everything, I suppose. One thing I've been focusing on is trying to do a lot more packageless shopping, which especially right now things are just a little complicated, but in general, I've always been a farmer's market person and tried to shop like more in bulk with grains and dry goods and that sort of thing so that you don't have as much packaging. So I think that's something that people can do, but just more, I mean, I'm pretty new to the DC area, so I'm not sure what all is out there, but I think that's kind of one of my action steps is to see what's available in terms of avoiding some of that packaging, especially once things maybe settle a little bit in terms of availability.
Yeah, definitely. It's not an easy time.
I think shopping locally also, I think, is very important, especially, there are a lot of shops that are working in circular in this way. But instead of relying so much on MNCs and like Amazon and whatnot, that also use a lot of packaging, you can make an impact in like just shopping locally, helping that local business out, especially during this time, and especially if there are initiatives like this that are going on. Yeah, this can make more of like more than just an environmental impact, but an economical impact for that business as well.
Definitely. Very good point.
All right, you guys. This has been a great video session. Thank you, Simona, for sharing your thoughts. And if anyone wants to continue the conversation, please just comment on our forum and we'll send the questions to Simona that way. But thank you, everyone, for joining on this day. I know. Please do tell your professional connections, your friends and family, anyone who's interested in social impact to join. And if anyone's interested in presenting, please reach out to me directly. Thank you so much, Simona. Thank you, everyone, for your thoughts today. We will see you next time.
Thanks, Shivani, and thanks to all for joining us. And thanks to the Impaction team and for everything that you do. It's amazing.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Until next time.